Well, thank you for joining us for this week's episode of AccuWeather's Everything Under the Sun podcast. I'm your host, meteorologist Regina Miller. I'm joined in the studio now by Andy Robb, my producer, and we are continuing our discussion today, Andy, on forensics and summertime.
Yeah. After last week, I want more. I'm ready.
I know.
Let's go.
You know what? It's hard to imagine how many things that can cause injury, death, or there's some significant problems you can run into in the summertime. And so we're joined in the studio now by Dr. Joe Sobel and by our forensic meteorologist, Steve Wistar. And we are going to be talking about some summer incidents that you've had to investigate as part of the forensic meteorology department here at AccuWeather. So thank you both for sitting down with me once again.
Always our pleasure.
So last week we were talking about a case where there was a food truck explosion, and part of that was the fact that the temperature in the air is not the same as what you have with the temperature on the macadam or in the ground or in a car or different things like that. So there's a lot that people have to consider when it comes to heat-related issues. Do you guys have some cases related to that?
Yeah, there have been a number of different kinds of cases that have been heat-related that we've been involved with, or summer weather-related. In terms of stress on the human body, there are two kinds of cases that I can think of. First of all, the heat stress on an athlete when they're performing, either practicing or actually performing in a game when it's 95 degrees and very high humidity. That can really take a toll on the body in terms of staying hydrated and that kind of a thing. And there are certain regulations that a coach or a supervisor has to watch for, and that practice would be called off, or a game might be postponed if the weather conditions are above that and the danger to the athletes. And so we've had a couple of cases that have involved some serious injury and fatality.
We actually just had one. There was one 14-year-old boy collapsed and died after overheating at football practice. I saw this story, and this was on June 11th, I think they had this situation. So, I mean, you hear about it often. College students, and then, once in a while you hear about with a high school
It seems
student.
to happen every summer. There's a few of these.
Unfortunately.
Especially where it's humid, because it's the high humidity that makes it harder for the body to cool itself, because our bodies cool themselves by sweating.
Right.
And then the evaporation of that sweat off our body is what causes the cooling. The same situations you get out of a swimming pool and suddenly you feel chilled because of the evaporation of the water. It's a natural cooling process, and we've evolved to have that in our bodies. But when it's really humid outside, that makes it harder to evaporate moisture, and so the cooling effects get less and less. And if the humidity is all the way at 100%, there's no evaporation and no evaporational cooling. And so these heat death cases due to athletes, working out really hard on a hot day, tend to occur more, I would say, in the southeastern quarter of the country, or maybe just anywhere in the east, anywhere it's humid. We're out west where the weather's drier, there's less problem with that.
Now, so you guys have had, because that's the other thing that I had mentioned in our last podcast, where I was saying, in forensics and meteorology, I know a lot of times it's a lawsuit regarding responsibility. So they're bringing you in to find out the conditions. So can you give me an example on something like that, where there was stress to someone's body, where they may have been, sick or passed away from something like that, and you guys were brought in about the conditions?
Well, I can think of one case where a high school football player, like you just discussed, and this was actually in the New York City area. So Steve had mentioned that the Southeast might be more prone to this, but the heat and humidity can be pretty intense all the way up, even into New England on a summer day. And there's one more thing that needs to be considered, and that's sunshine. You have to account for the air temperature, the ground temperature, and the humidity, but also whether the sun is out or not. I'm sure your own experience, that when you're outside, and especially if it's June, and the sun is near its highest angles of the year and its strongest of the year, and most intense, that the additional impact of the sun can be very extreme. So these are cases in which, in this particular case, a high school football player passed out and unfortunately did pass away, the result of the heat stress involved.
And another thing to realize, and I think we talked a little bit about this last week, but that the air temperature that we hear is measured officially 6 feet above the ground. And so that's about the height of a head height of a person. But as you go down toward the ground on a sunny, hot day in the summer, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. So if it's 95 degrees at 6 feet above the ground, at 4 feet above the ground, it might be 105 degrees. And as you get down to 2 feet above the ground, it could be 115 degrees. And then, as we talked about some last week, right down on the pavement, if, say, a sports team, they're out running on a paved blacktop, that can be 140 degrees or more in the sun on a hot afternoon. And so the temperature of a person's body running is going to vary, and their legs are going to be hotter than their head. I don't know medically what that would do, but they are impacted.
And if they're running in gear sometimes too, they can't even.
Yeah, they may have full pads on
cool down. Yeah.
So you say they're running in 95-degree heat, but really only their head is in 95-degree heat, and their feet may be in 130-degree heat. Be really rough on someone who may have some hidden illness or something that.
Well, even on somebody who's completely healthy.
Well, I was going to say, even if you're not really if you're not staying well hydrated at that point in time, maybe there's not enough breaks for water or something like that.
Sure.
If it's, so is that kind of where, for example, that particular case you were talking about in New York, how did that case go? Like, who was blaming who was holding who responsible, and how did you guys get called into that one? Do you remember?
Well, the estate of the young man that passed away was charging that the practice should have been canceled or postponed or delayed, that the coach should not have had the kids out practicing under those particular weather conditions.
Okay.
The other kind of case that we were talking about here, heat related, and we hear about these kinds of cases, it seems like every year too, are heat fatalities inside a closed car, where somebody may leave a pet or a child inside a car and run out for only 10 or 15 minutes, or forget that they've left a child in the car. And the temperature has gotten, and the temperature will go up amazingly fast inside of a sealed car, depending on the color of the car, whether it's got leather seats or vinyl seats, and
the amount of sunshine that day,
exactly.
in addition to the temperature.
Right, because last week we said that with like a vinyl dashboard, temperatures inside can get over 170 degrees.
Over 170 degrees.
Now that's the temperature of the vinyl itself, not necessarily.
Oh, right, the inside of the car.
Right. But it can get to the point where obviously where the stress on a body can cause problems.
And I heard a tip which I thought was a really good idea, because what happens is and it's so sad when it happens sometimes where a parent forgets a child in the back of the car, because people get into habits. Like I remember one where the woman wasn't supposed to have the child that day, and the husband normally dropped off the kid, and the wife went to work, forgot. They said, put your purse in the back seat with the child. Put your phone in the back seat with the child, because out of habit, you're used to grabbing those out of habit. So it'll make you stop, think about what you're doing, and turn around and look. And I was like, that's a really good piece of advice, because we do have summer coming, and the fact that it can heat up very quickly.
One other thing, kind of case that we can get involved with in the summertime is lightning strikes. And Steve has been involved with a couple of very interesting cases like that.
Right. What have you run into with that, Steve?
Well, we had a case recently, the last few years, of a fatal lightning strike outside a racetrack in a parking lot. This was a car race, and there were a line of strong storms approaching. So the racetrack stopped the race and made announcements. Everyone go seek safety. There's storms approaching. Go out and get inside your car. But you know how people like to tailgate out in the parking lot at some of these events? Yeah. And so there was some people who set up a canvas cover, but it was open on the sides. And they sat there and were tailgating, while most people did the smart thing was actually get in their car.
Right.
And so what happened on this day was, unfortunately, bad luck, a lightning strike hit the parking lot, and there was one death and about 9 injuries. And so I got involved in reconstructing the details of that. And so what happened is the estate of the person who was hit and killed by the lightning, and a few of the people who were injured but still alive, sued the racetrack, claiming that they didn't do enough to make them safe. But I ended up going to court and testifying on this one and explaining to the jury that this was not a lone lightning strike. This was a line of storms. It was coming in. You could see it in the sky. You could see the lightning flashes. And we did a whole analysis with a map showing each strike during a particular minute. The company.
Oh, so you kind of went back and broke it down
we
into where
reconstructed
those,
minute by minute
wow.
for a 45-minute period to basically show that it was obvious that something was coming. And we matched up maps of the lightning strikes with Doppler radar showing the storm, and then also still pictures taken from the television broadcasts of the race showing the lightning strikes in the sky.
Oh, okay.
And so with all of this, and they had the information on the announcements made by the racetrack. And so most everyone, including a couple of AccuWeather employees, I found out later, had gone out to their car and gotten safely in the car, but these people tailgating unfortunately got hit by lightning. But, in the course of the trial, the jury understood that the racetrack had done everything they could do. They stopped the race. They told people to go seek safety. And these particular people that were hurt didn't fully seek safety. It is not safe in a thunderstorm to be outside under cover if it's open on the sides, especially when it's raining hard, because water conducts electricity. So if lightning hits nearby, the electrical energy can shoot across the ground and where those people are.
Yeah,
safe.
if you're in a wet parking lot, you can still get shocked from that because of the water.
Yeah, even they always say don't be under a tree in a thunderstorm. Well, that is true, but don't be 20 feet away either, because the lightning can come down the tree and then go across the ground. So anyway, that
was a very thorough. There was a lot of details that you had that you took with you to present there.
And there's another lightning case that is almost the exact opposite of the case that Steve just described, in which, and I hate to go back to high school athletes playing football. I think these kids might have been playing baseball.
Well, I was going to say summer. Yeah, I was going to say the summer. There's so many situations
it was a baseball.
like that.
It was a game, I believe, that was ongoing.
I remember this case.
There, what we use for lightning data, there is a system of lightning strike detectors across the United States that can electrically or electronically determine and archive the exact location and time of something like 90+% of the lightning cloud to ground lightning strikes that occur across the country. And that's one of the tools that we use, and that's what Steve used. In this particular case, we were able to show that the thunderstorm that was approaching the area, the very first lightning strike that it produced, that there was no history of lightning with the storm until the strike that caused the fatality on the baseball field. So kind of the exact opposite.
Because in that particular case, by going back and looking at the data, you recognize there was no warning.
Exactly.
That strike, unfortunately, was the warning, and that strike, unfortunately,
correct.
was fatal.
That's exactly right. Yep.
And are there any other kinds of cases that you've had to investigate related to heat or summer that are, that someone wouldn't necessarily think of?
Well, one thing I can think of that it's related to the sun, not necessarily to temperature or anything, is sun glare. We've been involved in a number of cases where a driver will claim that they were blinded by the sun. And so didn't see somebody stepping out in front of them, or didn't see a car coming. And there are a couple of things that are different in a case like that. It's not only is the weather something that needs to be reconstructed, but where the position of the sun, where was the sun in the sky?
Oh, so you're looking at the time of day angle.
Exactly. The sun, we call it elevation angle, the elevation that the sun is above the horizon, but the azimuth angle it is too, which means the angle, whether it's east or west, if the car is driving east-west and the sun is to the north, then it might not be a factor. But if the car is driving to the northwest and the sun is in the northwest part of the sky and is low on the horizon, then there may very well be a reasonable case for sun glare.
These cases usually happen right after sunrise or right before sunset. When
Yes.
the sun is
Yep.
right in your eyes as you're driving
I've had
towards it.
occasions like that.
Oh, yeah.
I
But,
think,
you
yeah,
know,
we all have.
Yeah.
I guess.
It can be very scary because we've had cases where someone just drives right into the truck at 60 miles an hour
my
and never
gosh.
saw it.
Never saw it.
And you can be on a curve and go around a curve and the angle changes and you have no problem with visibility, and boom, all of a sudden that angle lines up and you can't see a thing.
Right. And I can imagine that on a case like that, sometimes you have to actually go to the location also to see if there would have been anything that could have potentially blocked the sun in where the car was.
That could be very helpful too, yes.
Well, very interesting. Always enjoy talking to you guys. You have some great cases. And you said, Dr. Joe, that we should look at some divorce cases.
Sure, we could do a special
Let's
show
go.
on that.
Get a little,
How about for Valentine's Day?
For Valentine's Day, we're going to look at how the weather ruined my marriage. Thank you both for joining us. It was great.
Before we get out of here, it is Lightning Safety Awareness Week. So here are some tips about lightning safety with AccuWeather Ready.
Lightning causes more casualties annually in the U.S. than any other storm-related phenomenon, except flooding. About 100 lightning bolts strike the Earth's surface every second. That's about 8 million times a day, 3 billion times a year. Lightning's more frequent in the summer and in tropical areas, but lightning's known to happen anywhere in the world and during all seasons. The most well-known lightning is the striking lightning, which goes between clouds and the ground. Also, there's cloud-to-cloud and cloud-to-air lightning. Extremely rare is ball lightning, where the electrical charge forms into a ball and travels along the ground. Thunderstorms generally move west to east and often occur late in the afternoon or early evening when humidity is the greatest. No place is completely safe from lightning, but some places are safer and some are more dangerous than others. Being out fishing, being on the beach, hiking, and golfing are high on the list of dangerous activities in a thunderstorm. In general, when thunder roars, go indoors. If you can hear thunder, lightning is close enough to strike you. Thunder is known to strike even when it's 10 miles away. Loud and frequent thunder can indicate lightning's on the way. High winds, rainfall, and heavy cloud cover also indicates lightning is close. Count the seconds between lightning and thunder and divide by 5 to determine how many miles away the lightning is from you. Light travels faster than sound, so you can see it before you hear it. If they happen less than 30 seconds apart, seek a safe place immediately. If you're outside and unable to get inside, do the best you can, like getting into a ditch or a car with the windows up if possible. There are some myths about lightning, and one of them has to do with cars. The myth: rubber tires on your car protect you. Fact: it's actually the metal frame that protects you, but avoid touching metal from inside the car. Myth: lightning never strikes twice in the same place. Fact: it does, especially tall objects like buildings and trees. Myth: you're safe under a tree or lying on the ground. Fact: tall items are more prone to lightning strikes, and the smaller the contact area, the better. Make yourself as small as possible, kind of like a cannonball. Crouch down with your feet together, hands on your head, and you'll be a smaller target. Plus, if lightning strikes close by, you'll have fewer burns. In general, don't lay flat on the ground, don't get on your hands and knees, don't stand under a single tree. A thick forest is better, but not by the tallest trees. Don't be near water, and don't be above a tree line on a mountain. Below the tree line is safer. Inside a house or large enclosed structure is the safest. Stay inside for 30 minutes after the last sound of thunder. Lightning can strike from up to 10 miles away. Get out of the shower, don't wash dishes, and get off any corded or charging phones. Avoid windows. Put the vacuum cleaner, hair dryer, and curling iron down and unplug them. Major appliances like refrigerators and stoves have built-in protection. A little knowledge about lightning can make your summer safer and more enjoyable. And remember, when thunder roars, go indoors. For more safety and preparedness tips, go to AccuWeather.com/ready. For AccuWeather, I'm Holly Holdren.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to AccuWeather's Everything Under the Sun, giving you the stories behind the weather and so much more. New episodes every Thursday. Just search for AccuWeather on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or visit AccuWeather.com/podcast.